the River Musky Factory.
Thanks to Slide and the Drift for rocking us into episode 13 of the Musky Monday seminar series. This week, a man who may have spent more hours fishing out on Lake St. Clair than anyone else alive. He spends so much time out there. He wasn't around this weekend to do the tech checks for us because he was out fishing on Lake St. Clair. So you can imagine what happens when a musky fanatic spends more time out on the best musky fishery on the planet than anyone else. He catches an incredible amount of muskies. So Jason Quintano, owner of Fins and Grins, is going to tell us all about that tonight. Lisa, you've got a picture I think you were going to kick up here at the start. This is one of Jason's many amazing catches, and this is the current Lake St. Clair record muskie, I believe. So he's going to tell us all about this and how he catches what he did, what he does, the tricks of a troller and the tricks of a new age caster too. Spending more time out there casting. If you're a fan of electronics, Jason is a huge Panoptics guy, and so we're going to talk Panoptics in detail and show you some amazing pics off the Panoptics later on in the show as well. Before we get to Jason, Dr. Sean Landsman is going to come out for Ask the Biologist, our weekly Ask the Biologist segment. And this week, Sean is going to talk all about good weed and the importance of good weed to muskies and to musky fishing through the spring, summer, and fall. Weed, bad weed, knowing the difference is important, and so Sean's going to fill in all the blanks on those important questions for us in Ask the Biologist in just a couple of minutes. Coming up on the Musky Monday seminar series next week on April 5th, he was so hard to nail down. I'm so pleased to announce Big Jim McLaughlin is going to be here. Everybody already knows Big Jim McLaughlin. I don't have to say much about him. Maybe what you don't know about Big Jim is he's been a muskie catcher and a muskie fanatic for a long, long time. So we're going to talk muskies with Big Jim. We're going to talk the Rideau River and local muskies, big focus on the Rideau. And we're going to talk some history of musky fishing around Ottawa with Big Jim as well. You don't want to miss that. He's going to join us next week. And before he does that, Sean is going to give us a really good review of all the research that, if you're not aware of, there's an incredible body of research that's been conducted on the Rideau on muskies already. So he's going to touch on some of the stuff in the past that's been significant, and he's going to talk about current study that's underway on the Rideau next week. So that can't wait to do that. April 12th, the death of the St. Lawrence muskie fishery. That's hard to say, but it's the research for the last decade or more points to some really serious problems, and so we're going to bring that to your attention in advance of the Muskie Odyssey and the Muskie Symposium, where you can go and hear from the horse's mouth a little more. We have a panel discussion, so we're going to take lots of your questions on the fishery next week. Peter Levick's going to be here. Bill Barber's going to be here. Rob McCrae and Jim Hutchings, two guys who've watched in detail and been involved in the management aspects as well as the study aspects of this for decades and decades. So come out to that on April 12th. Thank yous out of the way as usual. Thanks to you, the listener, who's here every week and sends us all these questions. And that's why Sean's talking about good weed again this evening. Weeds drive musky fishing, plain and simple. Sean's going to tell you why that's so important. Thanks to the Musky Factory team, Mike Spratt in the back making baits, to Lisa, our producer extraordinaire. And we have some big news regarding Lisa this evening. Lisa's involved in a world premiere. Is that right, Lisa?
Okay, that sounds good. I like it.
Yeah, we'll blow it up. It's our show. We can say anything what we want. And so you have a video clip, and then we'll talk about this, right?
Yeah, I do.
We're talking big fish. We're talking big baits.
Chasing fall giants.
Fish. 10 minutes in, and we got our first giant Ottawa River muskie in the bag. That's a lot bigger fish than what I anticipated to start with. That is a beautiful, thick fish.
A nice fall fish right there. Fish is in the net, and of course, the second the fish is in the net, it really just falls right out of its mouth. It was quite the experience. I'll never forget that day. It changed everything for me.
You never forget your first muskie.
Oh no. Every detail of that trip I remember for sure.
Fish. Little tail splash on you. Another Ottawa River muskie. Let's get her back in the water. That's exciting when that happens. I love it. That makes that 6-hour drive this morning worth it.
Wow. That looks awesome. Tell us about that debut happening later tonight.
Yeah, that was a ton of fun. Brent Bochak is an awesome guy, and Dan from Live to Fish. I can't even say enough good about them. Anyways, it's premiering tonight on their YouTube channel, Setting the Hook TV with Brent Bochak. I'll put a link in the comments for everybody. As of 8:45, should be hopefully around the end of the show tonight. If you want to check it out, we much appreciated.
Okay, and we'll touch on that again at the end of the show. Good looking stuff. Can't wait. Wow. I've seen it a bunch of times already, but I can't wait to watch it again as well. So fantastic stuff, Lisa. We'll talk again shortly. And Mike Kadura, our backup producer, and you got to lean down a little bit so we can see the logo. Michigan.
Lisa's a champ, and so is Michigan.
You're not just jumping on the bandwagon. You're homegrown. You're Detroit.
That's right. That's right. All I'm waiting for, another championship for Michigan would be great for me. Yeah. And watching Lisa's show is going to be great too. Like I said, it's another really good weekend. Looking forward to some cool stuff.
Yeah, and listening to Jason in a couple minutes. We're gonna get to go to fish school again this week. So fantastic and continued success to Michigan again this weekend. Fingers crossed.
There we go.
Into the Final Four, baby. Into the Final Four.
That's
okay. And thanks to Shimano, as always, 100 years. Big part of our musky fishing life, big part of your life. When we talk to Jason tonight, you can see what he's using out on the water. He's got more musky equipment than anyone I know. Thanks to Andre Lalone, best boat guy I know. Crestliner Boats and Mercury Motors. Andre's out in Wendover, Ontario. Drop him a line anytime. Suick Lures and Chaos Tackle. Love your stuff, guys. Catch lots of fish on your baits. To Muskies Canada. We love Muskies Canada so much. We donate $2 to research through Muskies Canada through every bait we sell. The Muskie Factory Bait Company. Do what we can with that. And coming up to the Muskie Odyssey, April 17th and 18th. I think you've got a poster for us on that, Lisa. It's an incredible month of muskie learning. This is going to be 16. If you don't know already, I've been telling you for a few weeks, but 16 different speakers, different presentations. Every chapter's represented at this. So many different baits. The hard to get baits are all available at this. So check out the Muskie Odyssey, April 17th and 18th. And Sean Landsman, Dr. Landsman, and I are both going to be there talking about the Ottawa River as well. So don't miss that. And then at the end of the month, the Muskie Trader Muskie Symposium, April 30th and May 1st. Again, raising money for muskie research. Some of that muskie is going to go to research on the St. Lawrence, support research on the St. Lawrence right now, and some of that money is going to go to support Cook Labs and Stephen Cook and Sean Landsman's work at Carleton University. So a great cause, events that you want to be involved in, and it's time to bring out the good doctor and ask him, what's with weeds and muskie, Sean?
Well, I mean, they're a match made in heaven. Muskies, you know, wherever you find weeds, you're gonna the muskies won't be far behind. And certainly, they will use them in some water bodies more often than they might other types of structure, or in other water bodies, you might see them transition from using weeds quite often during earlier parts of the season, for example, and then they might move out to rock reefs and things. I know that's the case on Lake of the Woods. As you start to get into August, you tend to start moving out towards main lake reefs and things like that. So, but in July and June, you'll definitely find muskies, up shallow. So, and in the weeds. So really, weeds are amazing. And I always get super twitchy when I find good weeds, which is not particularly hard on the Ottawa, but certainly fishing like Lake of the Woods, sometimes finding a good weed bed can be a little bit difficult because of something I will talk about later. And I think that's probably something that Gord has already talked about during his broadcast. So I'm going to go ahead and fire up my presentation here. Remind me to talk a little bit about the Project Noble Beast work, John, before I end this, because for some reason I ended up forgetting I kind of tacked it in right at the end as you were doing your introduction there, but I'll share a little bit of some information that we gleaned from doing our periodic tracking during that project, and how that might turn things or contradict some commonly held beliefs about how deep muskies go in the late fall and what they tend to relate to. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. It goes without saying that weeds are critically important for early survival or survival of early life stages. So, juvenile fish need cover because, the surrounding areas and the surrounding habitats are a big, scary place for small fish. A muskie, a 1-year-old muskie might be 12 inches long, right? That's and they're long and skinny. They're basically just a little piece of pasta and stuff just sucks them down. And certainly there's been research that has looked at survival of juvenile muskies after stocking, and they show a fairly high percentage of those individuals actually just get eaten by birds and water snakes even. And in some areas where you've got, lakes with a lack of vegetation, it's those types of water bodies where you might start to see higher predation. And that's been noted in the literature, including in this study done by Weber and Weber in 2020 on a couple of Iowa lakes. Muskies stocked into Iowa lakes that had an abundance of weeds escaped predation, whereas this one that really didn't have a lot of weeds, there was a high level of bird and water snake predation on muskies. But not every weed will be sufficient to protect fish, right? So there's a big difference between, walking across a well-manicured lawn. Say you're like a cat walking across a well-manicured lawn, or you're a cat walking through a forest, right? So you got the potential threat from a bald eagle coming down and snatching you up as this little kitty walking across the lawn, right? Or you're under the protection of trees when you're in a forest. And the same is kind of true for muskies when they're swimming through these weed beds where the weeds come up and create kind of a canopy over them. It makes it really hard for birds above to see the muskies as they're swimming around in the weed beds. But if the muskies are above the weeds, then it's much easier for the birds to pick them up as they're swimming around. Let me go to the next slide here. And spawning. So, muskies will spawn on a variety of substrates. So they will spawn over, just bare sand. They'll spawn over gravel. They'll spawn over wood as well. In fact, wood has been linked to reproductive success. But often muskies will choose to spawn over weeds. And so that's, especially true probably here in Ontario. It's been demonstrated a number of times, not just in those two studies there in the literature, but it's been demonstrated a number of times. However, there is a bit of a caveat. So that, by the way, before I move to the next slide, that bottom picture shows two muskies spawning at night, and you can see the weeds in that photo there. But weeds aren't always good for spawning. So one thing we have to be a little cognizant of is, we don't want to go around just like, putting a bunch of nutrients into lakes and trying to get weeds to grow because we want to catch more muskies and we want more muskies to live to adulthood. It doesn't really work that way. We have to be very careful about that. So some of these lakes that are really high in nutrients, that's great for the plants. But at some point, there may be too many plants growing, and then some of those end up dying. And when those plants die, you might think, well, it's not that big a deal, except when that plant material starts decomposing. And when they start decomposing, they use up oxygen. That's one of the things that's required for decomposition is an oxygen-rich environment. So any available oxygen, those weeds will take out of the water. And so muskies in one large-scale, pretty robust study in Wisconsin actually really didn't choose habitats that had a lot of heavy weeds. This was true in lakes that were already rich in nutrients. And so the authors think that these areas, as those weeds start to die, they start to use up the oxygen right at the bottom of where all the weeds are and where the weeds meet like the muck and silt. And so there's like a little layer of very low oxygen water. And if you're an egg, you can't escape that. So over, long periods of time, many generations, muskies have figured out to stay away from those really heavily vegetated areas within those particular kinds of lakes. Wasn't necessarily the same case for lakes that are more mesotrophic or kind of, medium nutrient rich, and not so much the case for those low nutrient rich lakes. But nevertheless, in some of these more productive systems, they actually avoid heavily vegetated areas. So for the next several slides, I'm gonna give you guys show you some examples of common weeds we might see out when we're fishing, and tell you a little bit about some of them, just to try and help you identify these weeds when you're out on the water. The weeds that I have a little bullet down there. When I start getting real twitchy when I see pondweed, or what we might call cabbage. Okay. The genus of this type of weed is called Potamogeton. That's a very diverse group. They range from like really broadleaf cabbage, which we might call tobacco cabbage. I get super twitchy when I see that stuff. But they range from that broadleaf cabbage to the more like the smaller, narrower leafed curly leaf pondweed. That Richardson's pondweed is a very common one that we have here in Ontario, and clasping leaf pondweed as well. But this genus of weeds contains other junk weeds like that slender pondweed we see in the bottom right there. And a lot of spawning locations have an abundance of this type of weed. Another kind of weed is called musk grass. We might also call it skunkweed or skunk grass. Chara is the genus, or Cara, depending on how you want to pronounce it. It too is also used for spawning, including in Leech Lake. So if we have any viewers from Minnesota here, Leech Lake muskies have been associated with using Chara, which sometimes it tends to grow out a little bit deeper. If you're throwing like a bulldog or a crankbait, and you actually get it down to the bottom off of the areas where you might have milfoil or pondweed or cabbage, you might actually run into this stuff because it tends to grow a bit deeper. And so in Leech Lake, muskies were found to spawn in deeper water over some of this kind of vegetation. It's very similar to something called Nutella, not to be confused with that delicious chocolatey treat Nutella. It looks very similar, and so you can easily mistake them. But you can see that that skunk grass has kind of like, they have like little clusters of leaves, as opposed to the Nutella, which is much sparser and strandier, I guess. Is that a word? Than the skunk grass. Coontail, that's something I think a lot of us are really familiar with. Coontail can be a little, in my experience, can be a little tricky to fish because it tends to be really dense. But on that sort of same token, it can also be really good for fish, because they actually may harbor up to 50% more food for fish and waterfowl because of how dense the leaves are and the branches are spaced together. And so it just means there's more surface area for bugs to, like, you know, feed on and places to hide for bugs, as opposed to something like that stuff there, which is pretty sparse. Now, this stuff is all over the Ottawa. Anyone that's ever fished the Ottawa will be like, oh, I hate this stuff, especially if you're trying to throw top water. When it starts to go to flower, like in the bottom left there, you can see those plants coming up to the surface. That stuff will just wrap in your tail baits or whatever. You throw a bucktail into that stuff, and the stringy bits will just wrap around the clevises, and then the bait's all messed up. Once that stuff matures, it can actually be quite dense as well. I mean, I find muskies in this stuff on the Ottawa River. I'm sure John has as well. They will use that. You can get pretty discrete pockets of this stuff. And anytime you have a pocket which forms an edge, fish will position themselves around those edges, because that's what they do. They're ambush predators. Eurasian milfoil is one that probably doesn't need much introduction. I almost didn't even include it in this. We're all probably really familiar with milfoil. It is an invasive species, so some of you may not know that. It's not native to North America. Eurasian milfoil may have a bit of a reddish brown tip, and so that'll help you identify it. I did want to talk a little bit about rusty crayfish. I think Gord spoke a bit about rusty crayfish and the destruction that they've wreaked all over Lake of the Woods. And I've noticed that too. When my father and I started fishing Lake of the Woods back in 2001, we would notice, nice weed beds. Well, we'd start, trying to come back to those weed beds in the following years. And at some point we just couldn't find very many of those weed beds that we once were able to fish. And now it's kind of difficult to find a good lush weed bed on Lake of the Woods. You can find little strands here and there in sandy bays, but it can be kind of tricky. It's actually a native species in the Ohio River drainage, but has been moved around by the bait industry and, anglers that just didn't really know any better. So it unfortunately has wreaked quite a bit of havoc across North America, including in Ontario. So I just threw this in here because I was so focused on identification stuff that I almost, forgot to talk about some of the things that we learned in Project Noble Beast. One of the things that was so surprising to me was because for years I heard, oh, well, in late fall, these fish just get out of the shallows and they go into the channels, they go on the break lines, and you don't even need to waste your time up in the shallow water. We found a 50-incher in 3 feet of water way at the back of a bay that it had been in all year, all summer, in the super heavily vegetated bay in 2 to 3 feet of water. We found another 42-incher, same story in a different section of river. It was up in 2 or 3 feet of water. So these fish will use weeds all year. It does not, don't fall into the trap of just because it's not green doesn't mean it's worth fishing, because weeds are cover and they provide good cover and substrate and food for other organisms, regardless of whether they're green or not. And I saw in the comments, someone said, well, what weed is the best for holding fish? No one's ever really looked at that in terms of how muskies relate in terms of densities in certain areas with different kinds of vegetation. What I can say is that I think some weeds will lend themselves better to fish hunting in them. Super, super dense beds of coontail that are difficult for the muskies to see things in, may be hard for them to hunt. But if you've got that kind of right balance between dense enough for prey fish to feel comfortable and seek refuge in, but sparse enough that muskies can swim through them and hunt within those areas, within those weed beds, then I think you've got a good weed bed to fish. And so that's why I think cabbage to me is really one of those great weeds to try and find when you can, because I think it offers that perfect balance between broad leaves that provide good protection for juveniles and open enough that muskies can see things and find targets to hit. As always, if you have any questions, send them to John, or you can email me directly, or you can find me on Instagram and Twitter and can drop me a DM there too.
Fantastic as always, Sean. I'll add some comments. First, I'll tell people if they want to hear about Project Noble Beast, at the symposium at the end of the month, Sean's going to talk in depth for probably 40-45 minutes about Project Noble Beast. And that study, I'm going to speak for a different 45-minute presentation, and I'm going to talk about how you learn as a fisherman off of the research. So what Sean did in determining stress allowed us to follow fish around with transmitters and learn, for example, that giant muskies are in 2 feet of water in November. So, that changes the game. That kind of information changes the game. So if you want to hear those 2 presentations, check out the Musky Trader Symposium at the end of the month. The question that you saw out of the corner of your eye, what was the best weed for muskies? I'd go back to Sean talked about when he was drooling earlier, and I think that was about the cabbage. So if you're paying close attention, that's an absolute killer one. On the Ottawa, cabbage or coontail beds. If you find good cabbage or good coontail, you find muskies. And the good coontail is stuff that's a little bit spaced out, and that's a guarantee. We get really excited when we see those things. I wanted to ask you, because weeds are changing. I've been out on the river for a lot of years, and so the river is changing and the weed structures are changing on the river. So Eurasian milfoil, is that something that we're going to see more of in the future?
I'm sort of hesitate to answer or be speculative because I'm not an aquatic plant specialist. We might, I don't know enough about their preferred, habitats that they need. We might start seeing more of that. I always find it really interesting to talk to anglers. This is one of the things that I'm really curious to hear from people in terms of their observations of changes in vegetation beds. So I mean, John, I've talked with you before. I've seen it with my own eyes. I'm looking in the comments now from Steve's Vaca there about the Arnprior section. I've seen changes on Lake of the Woods. Things, these weed beds might be great one year, and then you go back the next year and you're like, what the heck? Where did all the weeds go? And then the next year they might be back again, or it might be 5 years later. And what drives that variation in growth? I have no idea. I mean, I think there's certain elements of changing water levels, and we've talked about that before on the Ottawa. I'd say that's probably likely to be one of the biggest influential factors in terms of where how weeds distribute themselves within a system. But I've seen changes in seemingly, in years with similar water levels and springs with similar water levels. And yet 1 year I'll have nice vegetation, and then another year that stuff is gone from a particular area. So
yeah, going out and mapping your vegetation from year to year. I mean, we fish edges as musky fishermen. There's no bigger edge than your weed edge, and yet it's different and can be very different from year to year. So going out and mapping those things. I'll just tell you that through slightly older eyes than yours, I have seen a change in the weed base on the river. The eelgrass that you mentioned has come in more and more and more into the system. And it seems that the pondweed, specifically the Richardson's pondweed, the beautiful broadleaf weed that you love, that muskies love, that one seems more challenged these days. I know in the Arnprior area and in our area. So definitely things changing on the river. So fantastic. And one comment on Project Noble Beast. Sean followed fish all over the river for almost the whole year with transmitters on them. The one behavioral constant you can take out of that and take to the bank is no matter what the conditions, no matter what the time of year, there were always fish in shallow on the good weed structures. And That one I say, people who've heard me talk at shows say, guy, he says the same thing every year, man. He said that last year, said that the year before, but you got to take that to the bank as a muskie fisherman, because not catching fish and not seeing fish is a big part of what we do. And do you move? They're not here. You can take to the bank that, yeah, they are there they're on the good weed structures. You're just not presenting the way that they want to be presented to, so gold right there, everybody. Thanks a lot, Sean.
Thanks.
As usual. Can't wait till next week, and we'll talk again about our upcoming presentation at the Odyssey as well, and what we're going to say to wow people at that. So take care.
Awesome.
And the man of the hour, Jason Quintano. Got to give Jason a little introduction here. I've had the pleasure of fishing with Jason a couple different years on his home water on Lake St. Clair. If you're from around Ottawa or the St. Lawrence, the season opens on Clair 2 weeks earlier than it does around here. And so it's a place where you can go and get on a bunch of fish. And Lisa, if you want to put up that picture of, this is a picture I'm really proud of, because this was a hard to get fish. This was a day where we didn't go out in the morning because the waves were too big. And we stood at the dock and thought, I don't know, but Jason went out for this fish anyway. And at the very end of the day, after we're reeling in all the lines, I think there's one line or two lines in the water we're about to reel in, and this one went off. That rod went off, and so that's the prettiest one of the prettiest patterns around, and I'm so happy to get that fish with Captain Jason Quintano. So thanks for that, Jason. Jason, as I said earlier, the most technical troller I have ever been in a boat with, so much so that he had a book. He had several books out, but he had a book, and he was looking at wind and waves and where on his line he was going to put his hang weights, and just incredible for a huge variety of lines. He is the exact opposite of what I am for a troller, because in my world on the Ottawa River, I let a line out 10 feet, and I let one out 15 feet, and I let a long line out about 30 feet, and then I troll over where I think muskies are laying down. And, that's a whole different world than getting into Jason's boat and doing what he does. And we'll look at his equipment and his setup in just a couple of moments or two. If you want to bring Jason out right now, the man of the hour, Jason Quintano, thanks for joining us. It's amazing that you're not out fishing today. We're pretty pleased with that. You were tough to get a hold of this past weekend. How did you do?
We did well. I was actually out this morning as well. We got our 5-man limit. It was cold this morning. It was 34 degrees for the most part, and the wind calmed down because yesterday the wind was howling, and we were out. Basically, got blew off by noon. So one day it's windy, and one day it's cold. One day it's muddy, and one day it's not. You know how it goes.
And you just go out like you're that machine for the people that you're just the guy who goes day after day after day, right?
Oh, well, I mean, you got to get out there, and you got clients waiting to get out. Spencer's the same way. Spencer's probably worse than me. I mean, he'll go out and it can be a hurricane, and Spencer will be out. So
awesome. And so you got a 5 fish limit of walleye this morning.
5-man limit.
Five guest limit of walleye this morning.
Yep, that's 6 each.
How many?
6 each per person.
Fantastic. And are you catching big fish?
Yesterday we caught some nice fish, 5 to 7 pounders. Today it was more males. The water got dirty, so we had to fish out a little bit deeper. The females are pushed up on the shelves more, 25 to 28 foot, and I couldn't get in that dirty water today. When we're jigging, we want 2 foot to 3 foot would be a great clarity. This morning we had 6 inches to 10 inches because of the wind and rain last night. So it changes by the day. Lake St. Clair is basically, not to talk bad about my lake, but I tell people it's like the toilet. When it flushes, it goes right down the Detroit River, and whatever happens on the lake, that's what happens on the river. So
just got to fish the right part of the toilet. That's all.
That's right.
There you go. There's a musky fishing tip to take home. Let's show people what you're fishing out of first of all, so that they understand your world. We'll talk about your setup, and then we'll talk about how you fish. So, Lisa, you got a picture of Jason's boat.
Yep.
Okay, so we got some nice electronics. It's comfortable inside. I was looking for that back view. All right, front deck and a back view. So that's a lot of rods. How big's your boat?
That's a 31-foot Tierra.
Okay.
It's a 12.5-foot beam. Twin 454s in it. I mean, out here, like the one day when you were here, those couple days, it's rough, and it's a rough body of water, and that's why we have such big boats. You know, we're going 18 miles, 20 miles across the lake on a given day, and if the wind picks up out of the west and I'm out east, there's only one way back, and there's nowhere to hide. So we got to have the big, heavy boats to, get us around out there.
I want to be in a 31-foot boat when that happens for sure. And I can tell you that there isn't one boat anything close to that on the Ottawa River. So, just two totally different worlds. What you're trolling with planer boards, right? So how many lines are you running at a time?
On average, 10 to 12. It depends how many clients I have on the boat. A normal trolling group is at least 4 people on average. Sometimes I have 3, sometimes I have 2, but it's 2 rods per person in Canada, and it's 3 in the States. I'll have 8 board rods out though, 2 long rods and 2 down rods. All my rods are Chaos. Extra heavy, 8-foot for my board rods, 10-foot for my long rods, and 7-foot for my down rods. And then they're all Shimano Takota 700s. And last year I actually started using the Torinos 20D, I believe it's called. It's a saltwater reel with a lever drag. It's phenomenal, especially for your outside lines. We can get into that more if you want to talk about setups like once we get moving here.
What kind of line do you use?
I use High Seas. It's 50 pound for my main line and 80 pound fluorocarbon leaders. High Seas Grand Slam.
So you're 50 pound braid?
No, mono.
It's a 50 pound mono. See, that's different than, again, Clair is Planet Clair. If you're not from Lake St. Clair, in the musky world, it's the place that everybody talks down about because we're jealous, because we're not on Clair. But how you fish, how you're set up to fish, what musky fishing is just completely different on Planet Clair. So mono isn't something that musky guys use at all. You do a bunch of casting these days too. You're casting with braid.
Oh yeah. Yep.
You're casting with braid, but trolling with mono. So if you're on the US side, 4 guests, you've got a crew member with you too, right?
Yep, I always have first mate with me. I can get away without having one, but I feel like it's a good thing to have it for the clients and myself. I'm not getting younger. It's a lot of work when you're out there trolling 10 to 12 lines. I always tell people that when they talk about casting and trolling. Oh, trolling's not work. Come out and work with me for a week, then tell me if it's work or not. We call it baling hay. You start on one side of the boat, and you go to the other side, and then reset everything. And you're pulling double 10s in from the outside board line. The outside board line could be 150 feet just to the end of the board. Then you got another 80 feet past that, for an example. So you're at 230 feet right out of the gate and bringing in double 10s that far, full of weeds. Yeah. Good time.
And then let them back out. Yeah, it's unbelievable how hard those guys work, and so they pray for no weeds out on the water, the right wind, eh?
By September, you're paying attention to the wind every day because the weeds are starting to die off and they're floating around. There's certain days you can't even go to an area because the wind. Say if the wind is blowing out of the north, the South Shore is going to be jammed with weeds. So. You got to play the wind with the weeds and the watercolor.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you some questions about the wind a little bit later on. Your handling equipment really different because of the way that you fish and because of how people fish on Clair. And so there's been some things pioneered by the guys on Clair. Lisa, you've got a picture of yeah. I mean, that is not something that most musky guys have in their boat. What do you got there?
Yep. So that's our revival tank. Those are the best things to ever happen at Lake St. Clair, by far. When we're trolling, we're running a big mast system. We're not running inline boards. We're not stopping. Like when we're fighting a big fish, I'll slow down just enough to have the board so they won't completely stall or flip. So if we're fighting a big fish, I'm still going 0.8 to 0.6 to 0.8, just enough so the boards won't flip. But we still can't stop the boat 100% to help the fish recover. So that live well there is pumping in. And right now, for that picture, we shut the tank off so the bubbles weren't blowing in our face to make it for a better picture. But right there, that's pumping in 6 gallons per minute. And it's aerated too. So it's interface the entire time, reviving her instead of holding her in the top 6 inches of the water column, for example, or top foot. The top foot's going to be your warmest anyway. So we're drawing in water in those big boats from 2.5 feet deep. It's aerated. And then sometimes in the summer as well, when it gets warmer, I'll add in another aerator in the front to keep the water moving even more. So those are the best things that ever happened to this lake.
And Lake St. Clair's probably the first place to start using these and using them en masse. I was in your boat 10 years ago, and you already had one of these on board, and so and now everybody has one. Is that right?
Yeah, for the most part. And I mean, I think everybody should. I mean, in small boats, it's tough. I mean, in the smaller boats, you can stop the boat a lot of times, you know what I mean? Especially if they're trolling inline boards, it's not that big of a deal. But in the big boats, we just can't stop it like that. And those tanks, we started using them here probably like early 2000s. Dave Clark made the first ones. They're called fish tanks. I think they're basically an RV tank well, and then he customized it to that, and from there other guys have made them now out of Lexan. I like the Lexan. The clients like it because you can see through it, and I actually like it too because then I can tell how well the fish is recovering. Instead of opening the box and closing the box, I can see the mouth moving, the gill plates flaring around. So it's a great tool.
That's fantastic to see, and that's a new generation up from the one that I saw all those years ago. Fantastic. And if you're going to chase muskies out of a cabin cruiser style boat, you owe it to the Muskies to have one of those. And so just about anybody who's a charter captain has one of those now, and just about all the private anglers as well. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, for the most part. Yep.
Yeah, and I think that's made its way to most places in the muskie world as well. Just an example of better handling that has to happen. And so kudos. What a great looking picture of that fish inside that tank as well. Dr. Landsman just schooled us on good weeds and how important that is in muskie fishing. So talk to us about weeds out on Lake St. Clair. How does that influence where you're fishing, when you're fishing? How about spring fishing and weeds? What does that mean? Go on that for a little bit.
Well, the past few years that we've been in high water, and that means colder water, as you know as well, because your water's been high too. So, and we've had cold springs, except for this spring, which is encouraging because we're hoping maybe we might have some better weed growth in June. Because lately, in the past 3 to 4 years, our weed growth really isn't starting until mid-July or beginning of July, because everything's running behind, and then the fish are running behind. So, and then they're all, and the weed beds are moving too, like what you were talking about earlier. So I got my auto chart going, trying to start mapping out all the different weed beds, starting to put everything together. And then with the weeds as well, what you're talking about earlier, we're getting some kind of new weed out here now too. It sticks to everything. And we call it like angel hair. That's what it looks like. And some new weed I haven't seen before. And it's mainly more towards the middle of the lake as well. Not out east, but in the middle of the lake, like closer to the main current of the lake. So
does it grow in with all the other weeds? Is it displacing other weeds? Does it grow out deeper?
I think it is displacing other weeds because a lot of the cabbage areas that we had aren't there no more either. So we still have cabbage. I'm not saying that, but there's a lot more of that angel hair weed that I'm talking about in that area in the middle of the lake than there is cabbage compared to other years.
Okay. I mean, yeah, that's interesting. It's changing all over.
Oh yeah.
It is. And so you don't have weeds until the middle of July. So what are you doing? What are you doing in the start of your muskie season? How are you setting up?
Fish and water temperature. Water temps is what it all comes down to. Like, so in June, when our muskie season opens, you're basically trying to stay in the warmest water in the system and get out of the coldest. Okay. And that's going to be our main current. Our main current's coming from the South Channel, from the St. Clair River. And that's the area I try to avoid. I'm trying to get to where there's less current because the water is warmer.
Okay. And so you must have really missed the north side of the lake, that Canadian side last year.
Oh, yeah.
Because the north side of any lake, what Jason's saying about temperature, that's important for everybody. It doesn't matter if you fish a little lake or a little river, wherever you are, that water that warms up quickest is important, and that's almost always on the north side of what it is. And in your case, that's all the Canadian. That's all the Canadian side of the river. So
yeah, it's all the Canadian side, and then for us, it's the southeast corner of the lake because you're getting further and further away from the main current. So that's going to warm up first, and then as the season progresses, we get into July. Then the water's warming up. Then you start fishing more by like the Bell River and whatnot. But the last couple of years, because of the weed growth, from the Bell to the Puce has not been as good as years past. And I love that area. There's it's great big fish I've caught there. But for the last couple of years, that's been no weeds and cold water. So.
Wow. It's so interesting how much it changes from year to year. And how much the muskies are there or not there. Is that right?
Yes. And then like this year, right now, we're already down, and I don't know about you guys, but we're down about a good 1.5 foot water depth compared to last year. So that's going to change everything compared to the last 2 years, because the water flow is what dictates everything here. The high water has been really tough. It's good for the fish, but tough on us. Because the fish are spread out. There's nothing holding them in a certain area per se. You know what I mean? When I leave St. Clair shores and it's 72, for example, and I get out by the Thames and it's 74, there's nothing that's going to hold them into areas that makes them easier to pick up. They're spread out. There's weeds out in the middle of the lake, and the fish can go anywhere they want. There's nothing holding them anywhere. So that's what makes it tough. You hear a lot of guys out here saying, "Oh, the fish just aren't. They're not around like they used to be." No, they're spread out. They're a lot harder to catch when they're spread out as opposed to when they're potted up.
Interesting observation on the low water already at this point. Next week, one of my panel guests, Rob McRae, really aware of the research and monitoring that's gone on the St. Lawrence, looking for young of the year, seining studies, and water level analysis. And I bring this up because he sent me pictures a couple years ago. They're supposed to have a management program in place where the water levels are high, because traditionally water levels are high this time of year. And that's what fish have gotten used to for forever and ever. But this year he sent me pictures, and the water in the upper St. Lawrence looked like it was down 3 or 4 feet there at least. And that's because we got flooded out of Montreal and Ottawa in 2017 and 2019. And so they're scared to death of more flooding. So they're going to let a lot more water out earlier. And, so it's funny that you notice that where you are, and everybody's afraid of the flooding. It's got an impact the fish populations and on the fishing as well. So interesting observation that extends to all over the place. When do you fish on weeds and when do you fish on open water? What you've got those, you've got lots of both of those options on Clair. What do you take into account in that decision?
If I can be on weeds that are, a lot, that are flourishing and alive, I'm going to be on those weeds every day. In open water, for instance, I'd have my auto chart on. I know where every weed bed is that I've been trolling out there. So then I'm going to skirt the edge of those weed beds. And when I troll over to the next weed bed, I'm going to try to plan that based on which way the wind's coming too. So obviously, if the wind's a certain direction, I think the fish are going to be facing a certain way. I'm going to try to fish that edge of the weed line because the fish are going to position themselves in the weed bed with the current and the wind. So, but I'm on the weeds anytime I can be on the weeds. But our weeds the last couple of years there won't be any good weeds until at least the first week of July.
And you said you target those weed edges. Do you have the option of trolling over the middle of the weed bed?
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, there'll be pockets inside those weed beds as well. There'll be inside corners in the weed beds, but yeah, I'll go right over the weed bed as well. But certain days, I'll try to get right on the edge of those weeds and troll them just like if you were casting. So.
Yeah, it sounds sarcastic. I say this to guests out in the boat, but the puzzle's not really that hard because they're in thick weeds in the middle of the bed. They're on the edge of the weed bed, or they're out off of the weed bed. One of those three places. They're around the weeds. Absolutely, they're around the weeds. And so
the main thing is though too out here is you have to have the watercolor as well. A lot of the areas out here where there's good weed growth it'll be gin clear a lot of times. And you obviously don't want to be fishing gin clear water. You want to try to find stained water. So that's another thing that will push me to a certain area. So say I had a hard east wind and the weed beds were over, off of Stony, I'm going to go that way because I know there's good watercolor that day. You know what I mean? So that's the only good thing when you have a really, really hard wind. Usually the next day you could try to focus on those weed beds that you wouldn't be able to fish because it's normally gin clear. You don't want to fish gin clear water.
So and it's dynamic. It's dynamic based on wind. It's dynamic based on water level, on time of year. There's so many considerations. And that's where the experience of knowing what you're going to find in different parts of the lake, from being out there day after day really comes in. If you can seek perfect visibility, you've got options. What's perfect visibility for you? What are you looking for?
Trolling in the summertime, I'll take a foot, a foot of visibility, a foot and a half. In the fall, when the fish are packed up more, I'll fish in mud, like 1 inch of visibility. But if you're in the summertime, if the fish are spread out and you're trying to target fish in muddy water that are spread out, it's a lot more difficult. You know what I mean? So, but usually a foot to 2 foot is like what I really like. Casting, 2 to 3 foot visibility is primo. Nothing less than a foot. Casting is really hard out here, at least in that muddy water. I mean, 2 to 3 foot is perfect. 1 foot for casting, I do not like at all.
So you avoid the muddy water for casting. It's interesting. You said you love the muddy water when you're trolling.
Yeah.
And you see what dense bait fish.
Well, yeah. You're going to see more bait fish, obviously, because bait fish like the plankton and algae in the water, and that's what they're eating. But the main thing is when you're trolling, your baits are staying at one depth, so it's easier for the fish to target that lure staying at one depth. When you're casting, your lure's hitting the water, it's going down, coming up, so it's a lot harder for those fish to key in on the lure unless you cast out and you basically smack them right in the head. That's your best shot. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It took me a lot. I'm like you in that I used to religiously seek out the best visibility on the river. And the Ottawa River is very dynamic, just like St. Clair is, because we get a lot of regional thunderstorms. And so something that runs on the north side of our river will make different rivers coming on the Quebec side muddy. That'll make different sections have different visibility. So when I was younger, I was really running all over to find this ideal 3 to 4 feet of visibility, and that's really good for us for casting. For me, that's where the fish can get a good look at the bait, but not a great look at the boat, and a great look at you. And so that was ideal. And I used to fear muddy water. That was something we really avoided, and I would run a long way to find a little bit of visibility. But Gord Pizer said to me a lot of years ago in the boat, I've told this story a few times, but he asked me about a muddy bay, what's back in there? And I said, we don't go back in there. He said, why? And I said, it's muddy, it's zero visibility. And he just looked at me and said, really? And when Gord Pizer says that to you, you know that you missed out on something. And so since that day, I spend a lot more time fishing in dirty water as a caster. We fish. I've learned to fish a lot slower and to finish a lot more around the boat, because it just takes your muskies longer. They're a visual creature. It just takes them longer to get on a fish. But yeah, absolutely. Absolutely a best visibility to fish in, and the clear water, yeah, that makes everything tougher wherever you are. What about deepest weed edges? You fished weed edges. Do you seek out the deepest weeds in the area? Is that important to you?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, especially in the summertime, that's where the biggest fish are hanging out, in my opinion. Like when you say deep, how deep you mean? Like deep water, you mean? Or
well, you don't have deeper than 20 feet on the on Clair, right? But I'm thinking that the weeds that are growing in the deepest water, kind of those last weeds before you have the open water abyss. And you gave the answer that that I thought you would. That's where you're going to catch your giant fish.
Yep. And like right now, that's the biggest issue as well. So at the high water, the water is cleaner than normal as well. So then those fish are out in the weeds, out in the super clean water. So those fish are basically everywhere across the system right now. You know what I mean? And there's weeds out in this year, and not this year, but last year and year prior, in 23, 24 foot, because our water is so high, and it's gin clear out there. And that's one thing as a fishing guy that drives you nuts is I'll be riding out, I'll look over and I'll see a boat. I'll be like, wow, they're fishing in gin clear water. I'm like, I wouldn't fish there. And then later on that night, I see them on Facebook holding a fish. I'm like, are you kidding me? I mean, but when you're musky fishing, you got to stack all the odds into your favor. And I mean, it can happen anytime, anywhere, but that's what drives me nuts more than anything.
Yeah, there's always somebody on the internet with a bigger fish than we caught, and it's, it just goes there. There's muskies everywhere. They use so much of the water, but like you said, we stack the odds in our favor. So how important is the bottom to you in fishing as a troller? I listened to the guys from Georgian Bay on the panel, talking a few weeks back on the Kitchener on a Kitchener Muskies Canada event, and they crash into the bottom. They just love crashing stuff into the rocks all over the place, which on the Ottawa River, we're covered mostly in the lower Ottawa, mostly in silt and logs. So it's a good way to snag a lure on the bottom before too long. How about you? What does the bottom mean to you? Do you crash into it?
I don't crash into it, but I'll definitely have 2 or 3 lures that, in my spread down deep. I mean, I'll have one, a foot off the bottom. Sometimes as close as I can get to the bottom, but we're a hard bottom, but also a lot of sand bottom, soft. So I can't run lures right into the bottom. It's, it'd be mossy algae. And so I can't grind lures right to the bottom here like they can like on rock bottoms and stuff like that. But I definitely have my lures down deep. Like on my down rod, I'll have one down real deep and one up sky high. Everyone thinks with trolling, it's about getting your fish to eat that one lure. No, it's setting your spread the right way to get that fish to come into your spread and then have other lures for that fish ready to eat. So you got to have them up high. You got to have them down low too. So.
Wow. Is there a depth that your biggest fish come out of? Any part of the column?
Yeah. I say my biggest fish come out of the bottom third of the water column. But now what's funny though, the last couple of years with the high water, it's been opposite. I've caught a lot of big fish on high sets, which kind of bugs me a little bit because it takes away a little bit of the presentation and the skill to be able to fish deeper and do things that way, opposed to just setting your lures on the top, third of the water column and just trolling around and stroking a giant. So that's one thing that gets in my head a little bit too. But last year we caught some nice fish on deep sets, so opposed to the year before. So we'll see what happens this year with the water going lower.
That's a really interesting observation as a guide, that it takes, people just throw lures behind the boat and they're dragging them up top and they're catching fish, and it takes the science out of it. And it's funny when the fishing's really good, everybody's catching muskies. When it's the right time, when it's easy, then it's easy. But, there's so much of the time when it's not easy. And I thought, a comment you just casually made a couple moments ago, you said you're trolling a lure within a foot of the bottom. So to put that into context, you've got maybe 14 rods out, and that rod that's 100 feet off the side of the boat is out, and literally you're trolling it a foot off the bottom. And that's the science, and that's the magic, and that's when it's tough fishing that's going to catch the fish. And you said that's where your big fish are coming from as well. So how do you set up so that how important is precise depth to you? How do you set up so that you achieve precise depth on your trolling runs?
To me, I mean, your lure depth is more important than a color, more important than anything. Having that lure at the right depth is what's going to, be right in the fish's face. Now, when probably 10, 11 years ago, I hooked up with a guy named Daryl Huff. He came out with this thing called a Smart Troll. It was a little sensor. You put it in front of your lure. Then I had a transducer on the boat, and it sent a signal back I can't remember exactly, every 20 to 30 seconds, and it'll tell you exactly how deep your lure is running. So that book you saw on my boat, that's what we call the Bible. And the Bible had every lure I have at every depth, for the monoline out. And now though, with the Panoptics, I've sort of gotten away from that because I had the Panoptics on my side of the boat. I set the lure out, I could see where it's swimming, and clip it, send it down the line. And it's sort of like a cell phone now. I don't know no one's phone number in my head no more. So I sort of forgotten all my depths. So I haven't written down because now I just look at the Panoptics. I'm like, okay, it's 4 feet deep. Send it down the way. Now, when you're trolling, your outside board rods are going to be your highest sets. Okay. And then as you come in, you get deeper because in theory, when a fish hits, it'll come over and slide over your spread. In theory, sometimes that's not the case, depending if they're foul hooked or how aggressive the fish is. It might dive down under your line. One thing I noticed with the Panoptics the last couple of years is you would always have my inside board line. So we're getting to planer boards. My inside board line, I would always usually have that one that'd be deep. That's what the theory, shallow to deep. Well, now since I had the Panoptics, I'll actually have that one up higher. But I can see the fish come up into the spread. And then once they come up into the spread, then I'll have my second one out right back to where if they're falling away, that's when they're going to smoke it. So that's what I was saying earlier about there's more to trolling than what people think. It's not just trolling around. There's your lure position is what's big to bring the fish into your spread. Then to have your other lures in that right position for when they fall back. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. I've got about 3 questions off of what you said. I see a question up on our screen from Will Sadowski. It says, when you spot a fish on side imaging, how long will you target that fish before you move on and look for another fish. So your world and my world, we have two different answers.
So if I mark what I think is a big fish on side imaging, I'm going to mark it. I mean, that's the first thing I do. I mark it, with side imaging, puts it right onto your GPS. And then I will spin that area a few times. And it's not like you're necessarily going to, out here on Lake St. Clair, you're going to catch that one big fish, which I think I have done. But where there's one big one, there's usually always another big one. The big ones travel together. So if you get on a big fish, that's when I will mark. But I'll work that area over for a little while. And it's also if I'm in the middle of a moon phase, if I'm not in a moon phase, or when I leave that area, I'll troll away. Then later I'm like, well, you know what? I marked fish there. I got nothing going on here. I got a moon phase coming up in 45 minutes. Let's start trolling back that way. And maybe we'll get something going where we marked those fish earlier.
Yeah, and in my space, I don't have nearly the line out. For you to go back on a fish, how long does it take you to turn around and come back on a fish? How long is that?
Summertime, it feels like it's a big turn because you got bucktails out, so you can't turn too fast because they'll fall to the bottom. Fall time, when I really don't have no more tails out, I could turn pretty quick. If I have all crankbaits out, because they're not going to really dig into the bottom. They're going to float, so I could turn pretty fast. But it's in the summer when I got bucktails out, it's a pretty wide turn. And plus my planer boards, they pull wide and hard. And the downfall of that is I can't turn as fast. They're pulling hard, so they're further up ahead of the boat. Opposed to if they're pulling not as hard, they're back further, so you could turn faster. But I like a tight planer board line. In my head, I think it has a lot to do with the hook set. You got a soft line, but then there's days when it's calm. It's a catch-22. If you have boards that are jumping a little bit more and that line's flexing a little bit, that might trigger a bite. Where mine is taunt. Usually most of the time. But all of our big boards out here, for the most part, they're designed to surge a bit. Well, most of them. So they load up with water, then they'll shoot up like a foot to 2 foot. They add a little action to the lures. So
nice. And so that big turn, if it can be like a 15 or 20-minute turn for you to turn around and come back and go through a space. And so in my boat, if we go past a fish, with short lines, I can turn and be back on it in probably 90 seconds. And if I do see a fish, I'll present to it several times, and I'll try to see what it does from the first time that I see it on my electronics. Now, I have side imaging. I have Humminbird side imaging, so I have completely different electronics than you. How far back can you see your baits when you're looking at your spread off of one side of the boat? How far back are you looking?
Okay, well, I'm running. I have Humminbird side imaging. I mean, I love Mega Imaging. That is by far, I think it's one besides the GPS. That's probably my most valuable tool. The Panoptix is great. I love it. But they're both different tools. They both have different applications. So you have to have your side imaging going. But to your question about the Panoptix, I would say realistically 110 to 120 feet. They'll tell you in videos you can see a lure 150, 200 feet. I mean, maybe someone's better at setting the sensitivity and stuff than I am, but 110 to 120 feet. And I think there's a slide that I sent Lisa where it shows my lures on the Panoptix. And there's one that you can see that's about 110 feet out. So,
okay,
not there.
Nope, bait fish. We'll get on that.
There,
I know what that is.
Not there, right there. Yeah. So if you look at the graph there, that last one out back there, you can see that's 110 foot out right there. That was my down rod on the inside. That's my that was my, I think that day I was only running 8 rods, and those are my other 3 board rods right there. So the inside, and that day I was running them a little bit different, as you can see there as well. My outside was pretty deep. That little line.
And are you on a school of bait fish, or off a school of bait fish there as well?
I don't see any on there. That's just, there's a little bit of disturbance with the Panoptix. That's usually there. So, I mean, once you get used to looking at it, it goes away.
Wow, what an incredible tool to have. And it's funny. You do need both. As they do different things in the boat, and in truth, you need both. You got to take out the second mortgage. You need you need the two, and lots of screens. And yeah, those guys at 150 feet, they have the 32-inch screen on the dash of the boat. That's how they can see.
A lot of guys will say that, my rods will do the talking or this or that. I don't need all that stuff, and that's fine. On a day when they're biting, that's fine. You don't need all that stuff. But the days they're not biting, that's when it makes a difference, in my opinion. With the Panoptics, it's a lot like casting for me. I'll see my follows. I see the fish. I'm like, okay, well, I had a follow here. I had a follow there. Same thing when you're casting. Okay, well, you just have multiple follows. If you got nothing else going, I know where I'm going back to. So it's the same exact theory. But now I'm trolling. So like I'll text Spencer, or I'll text Holbert, or my buddy Eddie, or Alec, or whoever. I'm like, yeah, I had 5 follows a day. They go, oh, I thought you were trolling. I go, I am. But I mean, because now it's the same thing. I mean, I literally see everything that's going on. So,
wow. Wow. You mentioned another real nugget of gold there, about big fish being together. And often, like your best days are probably 3 or 4 or 5 giants all in a same area. Is that right?
Yeah.
A lot of us have those same stories where.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, those are the days that you always think about. I mean, when everything's going perfectly, and they're usually all right in the same area. I mean, I'll look at the waypoint, and that's the thing. Like on my GPS, clients will get on the boat and they'll look at the GPS, like, how do you even understand that? I got my big fish icons. I got this, but in those big fish spots will always be big fish spots. I mean, for whatever reason, even out here on Lake St. Clair, we're basically structureless, besides our weeds or current breaks or this or that. But those big fish spots will always be big fish spots. And some of those spots I've gone over with side imaging, I'm like, what's holding them here? But this is the way the current's breaking in the lake or whatever. I mean, but those spots will always be big fish spots, and big fish travel together.
Do you see big fish in pairs, and do you see big fish laying on the bottom?
Oh yeah, big fish lay on the bottom a lot. I mean, and you learn that out here quick. I mean, you should learn it quick on Lake St. Clair, because like when we were kids, we get a double header. Rod goes off, slow the boat down. Slow the boat down, the lures are dropping. All of a sudden, next rod goes off. Boom, 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 boom. Giant head shakes. I mean, put 2 and 2 together, it don't take that long, So big fish, in my opinion, are closer to the bottom on a daily basis. Now, when they're hot and active, yeah, they'll be up higher and, moving around more. But most of the big fish I mark are usually within 2 to 3 foot of the bottom.
Interesting. Yeah, the older you get, the more time you spend laying down, the more time you spend near the bottom. And again, Project Noble Beast, with Sean, that was one of the great findings in his study that you can take to the bank, is 2/3 of the time the fish that they tracked were on or near the bottom in an inactive state, and that's the telemetry. So and your big fish are more prone to spend more time laying down on the bottom, so that's absolutely it. You said color doesn't matter. Not a bit.
Color matters. But for me, putting the lure in the right position is more important than that. That's the next step. I mean, color does matter. When you're on my trolling boat, I probably have 600 to 800 lures on the boat, and one day they're eating one little color. They're eating that certain color, and that's what they're focusing on. And it's one little shade of a different than a blue frog, but it's a teal blue frog. I mean, you can't even barely tell the difference our eyes, but that's what they're going after that day, and that's what they're going to eat. And then in 2 hours, then they're done with that, and they're on to the next color. So color definitely does make a difference. My buddy Terry Vanderweyer, Rampage Charters, me and him will go to Ziggy's shop. And it's a $800 to $1,000 trip anytime I go there, because Terry will be like, oh, you need this one for my side, this one for my side, this one for my side. He's taught me a ton of colors for the east side. And that's the thing with Lake St. Clair. You'll have colors for the east side. You'll have colors that you need for the bell to the puce or out in the middle of the lake. There's different colors for every area, for all the different areas of the lake. Because typically out east, the water's, greener, a little bit more stained. You get by the bell and the puce in the middle, it's a lot cleaner. So
I got to start telling people that you need different colors depending on whether you're fishing the north side, the south side, the east side, or the west side of the river. That is a good bait salesman right there. What's on the bottom in Lake St. Clair? So the areas that you're trolling. And I guess I'm asking, what kind of forage fish are down there, but I want to know, are there a lot of gobies in Clair?
Oh yeah, there's a lot of gobies in Lake St. Clair. A lot of gobies. Are you asking bait or just gobies or bait fish or?
Well, I was going to talk to you about bait fish in general in a moment, but let's talk about gobies, because that's going to be a conversation that we have next week related to the St. Lawrence. They're massive egg eaters, but St. Clair is just one giant spawning toilet bowl, as you said, one giant toilet bowl of musky spawning. The numbers are still really strong. You're not missing any of the young of the year, and yet you have a massive goby population.
Yep. I don't know necessarily what the gobies will do, like to the muskies for spawning. I mean, everything out here eats them now: perch, walleye, bass. I mean, every fish is eating the gobies. I'm not saying gobies are good for the system by no means, but every invasive species that has came besides lampreys really hasn't hurt the fishery, I should say, in a horribly negative way, because everything now is eating them. Gobies are in everything: perch, walleye, bass, lampreys. Muskies eat lampreys. I don't know if a lot of people know that, but they spit them up in that live well a couple times a year. Because when they're in the live well, they're also
the big sea run lampreys. What's the biggest lamprey that you've seen a muskie spit up?
Maybe 8 to 10 inches. 8 to 10 inch lamprey. But definitely. Yep.
Okay, interesting. Wow. See, the gobies on the St. Lawrence are so numerous that they're egg eaters, and so they're not finding young of the year. They eat all the eggs, but it's interesting. I'm not aware of the studies on the goby population where you are, but your fishing is as strong as it's ever been. Is that right?
It's not the same as 2010 to 2014, or 15 for that matter. But do I think once the water goes back down, fishing will be really good again? Yes. This year we'll see what happens with the water going down. 2022, the water goes down even more. I mean, that's our biggest thing, is the water temperature. Those fish are so far spread out, there's nothing holding them anywhere. Once that water goes down, things will get better again. But I don't think we'll ever see like the glory years of 2010 to 2014 ever again, in my opinion. There's more pressure here now. I mean, we didn't have the pressure that we do now. I mean, and that's a fact. So, but I mean, it's still a great fishery. I mean, we're blessed to have it, but I don't think we'll ever see those years again. I mean, back in 2010 to 2014, a 6-hour trip, a 6-hour charter, we boat 10 to 12 fish on average in 6 hours. Now, I mean, and with a 50, now it's like in a 6-hour trip, if you get 6 fish, that's a good day. You know what I mean? A fish per hour. In all honesty, I don't really care about those numbers. I don't care about them at all. I'll take the big fish over that, But, when people come to Lake St. Clair, they expect size and numbers. So
I'm feeling bad for you with those 6 musky days, Jason. That's the whole musky world is shedding tears for you and your 6 musky days. But that's Planet Clair. It's interesting that you say the catch rate is half of what it was in the prime. On the St. Lawrence, the goby population exploded. I believe about 2008 is when you can really see increases in their numbers. And so, what you're talking about, it's interesting. I don't know the science or on the goby population or on research, but Lake St. Clair has been indestructible forever, ever, and ever. It's, collected all the pollution that the industrialization of the U.S. threw at it. It used to catch fire regularly. In the 60s, it was, I think, the most polluted inland lake in North America. They even shut fishing down, I know, completely for 2 years in the 60s.
Yep.
Yeah, and and still it's the most prolific muskie fishery on the planet, an incredible walleye fishery, an incredible smallmouth fishery. Is the perch population is huge too?
Oh yeah, I mean the perch was great this year. And back to my buddy Terry, I mean he runs an airboat over there over in Canada, and I usually go over there, a couple times a week, and I couldn't go this year, and love it. I love the reports I got from Terry, but it was very frustrating to tell me probably the best year in 15 years. I mean, it was hammering them, and we weren't allowed to go. So
on the Canadian side, yeah, wow. And the Ottawa River, we had just a 5-star year up here as well, and really missing the Americans. Northern Ontario, the same thing as well. So in truth, we can't wait for you all to come back, and all the lodges up Northern Ontario. They rely completely on tourism and muskie tourism, walleye tourism as well. So yeah, we sure want that. Let's talk about fishing as a team for a moment, because I met you and Spencer kind of as a team, and you guys are together a lot. You fish together so much, you work together. How does fishing in a team help? How do you do that? How does that help you out on the water?
Oh, it's huge. I mean, it's good to have a good circle of friends, a small circle, not too big a circle. One of my lines I tell people is everyone has a best friend. You tell so-and-so, hey, don't say nothing. John's over there smoking fish, but don't tell no one. Well, he has a best friend. He's going to tell too. So this is how it goes. But I mean, the circle, working with Spencer, I work with my buddy Eddie, Terry. Yeah, the circle is huge, especially on a big body of water. I mean, it helps you get things figured out. Even if you're not in the same area, you'd be like, hey man, you got any fouls, got any bites going lately? So that way, if you're even on the right area or not, with the moon phase coming up or not. I mean, having a good circle is the biggest thing. I mean, and that, with me and Spence, that's part of our pitch too. I mean, you're not just, getting to fish with me. You're not just getting to fish with Spencer. I mean, you're getting to fish with our circle, our connection of people. I mean, and the info that's coming in. So, and even though Spencer's casting more so than I am, when I'm trolling more in the summer, because I'll troll more in June, July, and about usually mid-August, I start casting more. And then, September, I'm about half and half. October, half and half. November, December, I'm strictly casting. I'm not trolling no more. But if Spencer's out casting, he's telling me his follows, what he's seeing. I'm telling him what I'm seeing. So it's definitely nice. I mean, and Spencer will go, and even when I'm casting or my brother's trolling or Alec who works with me, I'll ask him. We call the big boats the research vessels. They're out looking they're covering water, they're covering miles. I mean, when you're casting, you just don't have that option. But I mean, and that's the main thing I tell a lot of people. I mean, some guys like, I strictly cast. That's great. I mean, that's fine. But the hard part about that is if you were troll a little bit just to find fish, then you can sit on that area knowing that you're sitting, because out here, those fish move daily. I mean, they'll go 3-4 miles in a day. With our telemetry studies that we're having now through Muskies Canada and our DNR over here is doing some stuff as well. Our fish are going to Buffalo Harbor, New York. There's other stuff that's showing them that they'll go 5-7 miles in a day. So you go to one spot one day and that's it. And then they're gone. So, and usually out here, if you're on a pack of fish, so one day you're catching, mid 40s, and then you're getting you're getting your 50 that day. And then you're there for a couple of days and you're catching nice fish. You go back to, the following day and you start catching 36, 38 inchers. Those big fish are gone. the small fish follow the big fish out in the summertime. The big fish will be there first. Then if in that area, then you go start catching little ones, the big ones are gone. So
yeah,
in the fall, it's opposite. In the fall, the small fish will push in first, and then the big fish are going to come in after. And that's usually because of the shad. The smaller shad will come in, by the Bell River, for example, or the Thames or the Puce, and so the small bait fish, and then later, the bigger fish are going to come in. The bigger shad. Well, then here comes the bigger muskies. The bigger muskies are after the bigger shad. So.
Yeah, that's a really important differentiation that we make up here on the river as well. If you're in a spot and you're seeing small muskies, there's probably not a big fish in that area, because a 30-inch muskie that didn't learn to stay quiet when there's a big fish already got eaten. So the big ones and the little ones aren't hanging out on the same spots at the same time. Let's talk about hunting big. Wow, there's a couple places to go. Let's talk about hunting big fish for a moment. And Lisa, if you want to put that picture up that we had of a record of, it's a Clair record, is it?
Yeah, yep. I got in 2018. It was 57 and a quarter. Is between the Bell and the Ruscombe out on deep weeds that we were talking about earlier. I think I was in 18 to 19 foot of water.
Wow. Fantastic. What a gorgeous fish. Now the knock on Lake St. Clair, like there can be a knock on a place that produces fish like this, is that it doesn't produce 50-pound fish, but that at 57 and a quarter, is that a 50?
That wasn't a 50-pounder. No. I mean, I didn't weigh it. If I had to put a weight on it, I'd say 42 to 44 pounds. But I didn't weigh it, so my line is being to weigh it, don't say it. So, but do I think we have 50-pounders? Yes. Do I think they're stupid? No. And part of the problem is like, if we're going to catch a 50-pounder, it's going to be in the late fall, and our length in the late fall is very, very hard to come by. 50 to 53, yes. But if you get over 53 in the late fall, that's a big fish, because for some reason the length is very hard to come by. Are they out in the deepest part of the lake, or did they leave and go up into a river tributary somewhere? No one really knows. I've gone out fun fishing when I'm not guiding out in the deepest part of the lake, and I expect it, and pull a blank. You know what I mean? But I'm still marking some fish out there too, but that's probably where they are. I mean, no one's bothering them.
Finding the biggest fish in the system is just a challenge. Wow, that's a fantastic fish, and it's neat that you say, you talk about, most people would think of 50. It's over 57 inches. It's got to be over 50 pounds. No, I mean, that's a thick-looking fish, but it takes a lot to get over 50 pounds, and mostly it takes something that's that's really, really a thick fish.
40 pounds is a huge fish that people throw around like it's nothing. A 40-pounder is a giant. I mean, and on average, I maybe see 1 to 2 a year. Like literally, and everyone likes to throw around the 40-pound number too, like it's no big deal. And I mean, a 40-pounder is a giant fish. So a 50-pounder, I don't know. I mean, I was crying the day I got that 57 and a quarter. If I ever get a 50-pounder, maybe my last day in the boat, I'd have a heart attack. So.
Wow. Let's go back a moment to what are you looking for? Talk about bait fish, how important they are for you. What are you looking for bait fish? Can you tell what kind of bait fish you're looking at with your imaging? And so what is this? I'd
say those are, probably 2 to 4 inch tops, gizzard shad right there. Now in the summertime, any kind of bait fish I find, I'm happy with. If I find big shad in the summer, that's outstanding. I mean, that's a bonus. But in the summertime, the whole cycle's there with those bait fish as well. You know what I mean? So the walleye are there, the perch are there, the bass are there. Everything's there in the summertime, following those small bait fish. Now, when I get to the fall, I want the big gizzard shed, because that's when the big fish are following behind them. Like that picture there that you posted. I think that was probably second or third week in October, around the bell. You'll start getting the big, huge clouds of them like that. You know what I mean? But the bigger bait fish will be the bigger pixels. Small bait fish are small pixels, and that's a nice thing with side imaging and down imaging. It'll break it down to the pixel size for you. You know what I mean? Where with 2D, you really can't see it that well. It'll be more just fuzz, or and a lot of times people think that they're marking muskies and they're marking bait with 2D. You know what I mean? Because it's still packed together. It could pop up as a hook. Your 2D and your side imaging are huge. And out here in Lake St. Clair, we don't have no structure. So I always tell clients, our structure is watercolor, the weed beds that we do have, and bait fish. And that's it. But watercolor and bait fish are really the first two things I try to look for every day. You know what I mean? And then if I get lucky enough to be in the right watercolor on top of that weed bed, that's the bonus.
So when you find the right watercolor, a weed bed, and bait fish, that's your trifecta. That's your kill zone.
Yep.
What percentage of your bait fish are gizzard shad?
I'd say, probably 90% of them, unless we have big emerald shiners, in the mix. Like sometimes some of those the smaller bait fish could be big emerald shiners. You know what I mean? But gizzard shad are our primary forage.
Okay. Can you tell if you're looking at a school of perch?
Oh yeah. Because the perch are going to be closer to the bottom. You know what I mean? The perch are always a hug in the bottom. The perch aren't going to be suspended up, like the balls of bait fish that you're seeing on the screen like that. Perch are always usually hugging the bottom, at least out here in Lake St. Clair. So, but the perch are always focused to the bottom, and they will be like, the smaller pixels, unless you're on a big school of perch. But, if you're on 6 to 8 inch perch, that's what they're going to, it'll be smaller pixels opposed to the bigger pixels. I sent Lisa another picture of the bigger shad, and that, it would get me really excited in the fall.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's the gold mine that you're looking for.
Oh, yeah. That's money right there. So those right there, big? I'd say on average there, those are 8 to 12 inch gizzard shad. We have gizzard shad now out here that are 20 to 22 inches. Yep. Go ahead.
And are they the bigger the gizzard shad, the better draw they are for the muskies?
I would say so. I don't see why not. They're big musky snacks. One day, when I first put the tiara in the water, I was hooking up my Panoptics for the first time, and me and Alec, the guy that works with me, I'm going through the canal. Well, there's where the hoist is there's a cut in, so you literally see like the wall. You see everything. And I look at Alec, I go, well, that's a big school of crappie, that's going to be a shed. Next thing you know, there must have been a muskie or a pike chasing him into that little hoist corner. A 20 to 22 inch gizzard shad literally jumped out of the water, tore. He pinned them right in the corner right there. It was pretty cool to see something like that, unfold right in front of you. But no, the big shad equal big muskies, that's for sure. So
that's amazing learning that you've done. And that comes through staring at it for a lot of hours, working online and looking, but just staring for a long time. And so I really differentiate the bait fish that I'm looking at between emerald shiners, moon eyes. If I'm looking at perch on the water, they're generally there's more space between them in a school.
Yeah, that too. Yep.
When they school up, so you can identify the perch, and it's neat. You learn what you're looking at, that school of catfish. And the better those electronics get, the more they show you exactly what you're looking at as well.
Clients will always say, well, how do you know what you're looking at? I go, I catch fish, and I'll be looking at something and I've caught that fish, or I've seen it, and just over time I know exactly what I'm looking at, because I stare at that screen sometimes 16 hours a day. You know what I mean? So
yeah, you better pick up a thing or two after 16-hour days, 4 or 5 days a week. Wow. What didn't we cover? I think we've given a pretty good insight into trolling tonight. What didn't we cover, Jason? if anybody's got a question out there that you've been saving up for us, Lisa, throw that out. What about year classes on Clair? You talked about 2010 to 2014 being best of all. Spencer was saying that you're going to have a good year class coming up. Is it this year or next year? You're hoping for some giant fish.
Well, so I'd say 2 years ago, we lost a lot of our top end, 53 plus, they definitely came a lot harder to, were a lot harder to come across. And the main thing is like our tournaments out here. I mean, you'll see our tournaments 54, 54, 55, for a top 3 fish, 55, 55, 54. 1 year, I got bumped to 4th place with a 54 incher in our big tournament. And then the last couple of years, though, if you get a 53 or a 54, you're sitting in the money. I mean, that's for sure. I mean, now last year I had more fish over 52 inches than I did the year prior by far. You know what I mean? They're definitely getting longer again. We have a ton of 48 to 49s, big tigers coming up. I mean, last year we had 2 tigers that were 49 and 3/4 inches. And I think we had 6 or 7 over 46 inches for tigers. Our tiger population is exploding.
And that's new, right? I'm not used to people talking about tigers on Clair.
Yeah,
that's a new thing for you guys?
Now, say 7-8 years ago, if I caught, 5 to 10 tigers a year, that would be normal. On average, the last 3 years, I'm over 70 tigers a season right now. Oh yeah,
Get out.
No, wow. And now, is that a good thing or a bad thing? I mean, no one really knows. Is it attributed to the high water? That's probably the case. But they are beautiful fish. I mean, they're thick too. I mean, they're big, thick fish. But we definitely do have a big tiger population. June through mid-July is your time if you want a tiger. I mean, we catch a lot of tigers then. And then this year, November and December, I caught a lot of tigers casting. The other 49 3/4 was in December. So
wow, they are one of the most beautiful fish that swims. Those numbers are just dramatic in terms of how much of a change you've experienced. So much bigger pike population.
Oh yeah.
Not
our
who
pike
knows?
population is through the roof right now. Through the roof. I mean, which isn't a good thing either. So
interesting. Well, the system does change, and so Jason, I'm gonna say thank you so much for guesting with us this week. You and I could talk trolling and talk muskies for a couple more hours. I know we're gonna save that for the next time we're in Pittsburgh together.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And I'll look forward to that. I have some fun memories of hanging out with you there, and really appreciate you joining us on the show. A wealth of knowledge. How many days are you going to spend on Clair this year?
From June 6th through December.
Through to December, and you're out there already.
Oh yeah,
walleyes and then smallies. Yep. So yeah.
Yep. The smallies, I'll start doing smallies. The end of April, I start doing smallies, and then but right now it's just walleyes until the end of May.
Okay. Well, continued success to you. I can't wait to come and share a boat with you again soon. And so thanks for doing this. A pleasure and great lessons. Really great lessons for us all. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you, Jason.
All the best.
Appreciate it. Yeah, and we're gonna finish up with a video of Jason actually jigging a muskie on panoptics. So let's finish with that, and then John, you can take back over.
Okay.
Oh, you didn't like that, did you, bud? Go on. Come play. It's gonna turn on me? Here it comes.
Absolutely incredible. It's like, yeah, what a different dimension to the game, eh?
Oh yeah. I mean, in casting with Panoptics, I mean, trolling with the Panoptics is a great tool, but casting, it's phenomenal. I mean, we take up another hour of time if we start talking about that. So,
yeah, being able to see that fish, that's a tool that wasn't there just a few years ago. So,
yep.
gotta stay up. That's why you gotta stay up with the latest and greatest and the new technology. So,
yeah, definitely.
Fantastic, neat stuff, Jason. Thanks again for this, and we'll talk again before too long, my friend. Wow, what a wealth of knowledge. What a great guy, what an experienced musky angler we have. And Lisa, do you have any chance we have Brent Bocek in the back? I know he's really in demand tonight. No?
I was hoping he would, but we're right down. We're 3 minutes away from the launch, so I think we better just
3 minutes. I know you've got your world premiere of the Lisa Goodyear and the Giant Muskies video on setting the hook with Brent Bocek tonight. So a good timing for our show to end, and we can tell everybody to go where if they want to see this.
I just put a link in the comments, so head over to the YouTube channel and check it out. And next week it's the John Anderson episode.
A John Anderson episode too. They didn't even tell me. Oh, I'm gonna watch that one for sure. I can't wait. Hopefully there's some good fish on that one. In the meantime, yeah, it's a great show. It was a really successful outing for you and Brent. So if you want to see some cool local video on a cool new Canadian fishing program, check out Setting the Hook right now on YouTube. And thanks for another awesome week.